I decided I need opening music to start off things. Woohoo! Databases! Awesome. Great. Let's talk about database administration tools. Also, you can send me thoughts on other songs I should use that I could, for like either entrance music, kind of like I'm a wrestler, or like a closer in baseball, or like background music, something soothing that'll cause your mental synapses to really appreciate the joy of database administration tools. There's actually only one slide, and other than that, I'm just going to do a live demo, which, of course, I haven't actually prepared much for, so we'll see. I mean, I've done this like approximately 20 times in the past, or I've made the actors database that we've been talking about in previous lectures. So just the database administration tool we're going to use is called PhpMyAdmin, sometimes called PhpMyAdmin. Not really sure the proper pronunciation. It's a fantastic open source project. If you're ever going to, give money to an open source project, like to help support development, this is a really good choice. This is a fantastic, powerful tool. We have this running locally. I'm running it on Huygens, one of the servers, not on Euclid, because Euclid's our file server as well. I don't want to generate a lot of extra traffic for Euclid. You can log in with your MySQL username and password. I'm going to set up a bunch of different databases because that's the way I do things. I'm going to go ahead and use the NATO phonetic alphabet, so I'll have an Alpha database, and a Bravo database, and a Charlie database, and then, of course, Tango and Sierra and other exciting things like that. So you'll know you want to log into a particular database. You don't want to use your email username and password. You notice the site is not encrypted, so if you're on wireless and you're trying to log in, you'll be using, like, the username will be Zulu and the password will be Zulu, and that's just for your database. You don't want to be sending your email username and especially your email password over unencrypted wireless. That's a terrible idea. We'll talk about creating tables, a little bit about data types. I've gone ahead and put this link here. There's really good online documentation for MySQL. I mean, MySQL itself is actually an open source database. It's very, very powerful. A lot of startups use it for their database usage. And then, of course, when you get to be a larger organization and you kind of outgrow MySQL, you can then move on to the really, really big and expensive databases like Oracle and things like that. The two main types we're interested in are varchars, which are basically strings, and ints of various sizes. And I want to make sure, after showing how to sort of create the tables, we see how to add columns, because occasionally you make your database table and then you realize you left something out. So the first thing you would do, you would click on this link. It's going to pop open a window. You can't see this, but the little screen capture thing is up in the way here. Let me move that. So you can see we've got Huygens Lab, knet.edu/phpMyAdmin. You would log in with whatever your database username and password is. I'm going to log in as root, just because I'm badass like that. So when you log in, you'll see some number of databases that you have access to. In your case, it might actually just be the one database. What I'm going to do is create a database and some tables. I'm going to create the Hollywood database for all of our actor stuff that we've kind of been talking about. What I'm doing right now is setting the character setting, the character type. I always use UTF-8, just simple 8-bit ASCII characters. I guess apparently this means I'm very, being very, like, not even Eurocentric, like America-centric, because I'm not doing like 16-bit Unicode that'll support other languages, but whatever. I don't know, I can get away with that right now. So you'll sort of click on the database you're interested in, and it'll list all the tables. This one doesn't have any tables. This is our Hollywood database, so remember we want to have tables for movies, for actors, for directors. Let's start with actors. So that's the name of the table we want. We got to figure out how many columns. Well, we know we need one column for a primary key. We know we want the actor's name. We may possibly want their date of birth. I could do that as a timestamp. or I could do it as just a string. We may also want their, I don't know, other information about them. I'll just start with 3 columns for their primary key, name, and age. So we put that in, we click go. It's going to bring us to another place to walk through. So first we want primary key. It's standard in databases to name the primary key ID. In the past, I've named it PK. I don't really know why, because apparently no one else does that. So that's just a thing that I do. So don't learn from me the things that I do. The primary key, we want it to be a number. But if you look at the type here, you've got a whole bunch of different types. You've got int, but then you've also got tiny int, small int, medium int, big int, decimal, float. You've got all these different versions of int. Int is, of course, the most common one. You can always go to your references and pop open a new tab for numeric types. We can go in here, look at what eventually once it loads, we can look around. So we've got different versions of integer, we've got fixed point decimals, and so on and so forth. If we go to the integer types, wow, this is really slow when I'm recording. There we go. It's going to tell you sort of how big each one is. So tiny ints, that's 1 byte, small int is 2 bytes, medium int is 3 bytes, int is 4 bytes, and big int is going to be 8 bytes. So big int is basically a long. So we got to figure out how much, and you can have signed and unsigned, kind of like you can in C and C++. So you got to figure out, tiny int, that's clearly not big enough, even if it's unsigned. You can imagine a Hollywood database with more than 255 actors. Can you imagine one with more than 64K actors, 65,535? Maybe. So maybe we'll make it medium int. So that'll give us, actually I have no idea what this number is. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 16 million. I don't think we're going to have more than 16 million if we make it an unsigned medium int. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to make this medium int, and then under attributes over here, we're going to click unsigned. The weird thing about length and values, what's really goofy about this, for ints, this is actually the number of digits that you want it to display. You would think this would be like the number of bytes you want to use for the value, but in fact it's not. It's the number of, it's how much stuff you're displaying, how many digits you want to display, which is really weird. I always just leave that blank and let MySQL fill in some sort of a default. This is the collation, this is the character setting. For integer values, that doesn't really matter. This little null field lets you know, do I want this value to be null or not? Do I want to allow this value to be null or not? We don't ever want the primary key to be null, so I'm not going to check that. This is asking if I want to index it. So right now the only index types we know about are primary keys or foreign keys, which we'll sort of do an index on. There's also unique keys, which I'll talk about in a second, and also, you can possibly have a full text key. I'll talk more about these when you go on and take the database course, but for now, we'll just go ahead and mark it primary. And this AI is for auto increment. This means every time a new row gets inserted, we want a new value, and then you can leave a comment, but why do that? We also want the name of the actor. We're going to make that a varchar. Varchar is basically a string of variable length. It could be from 0 to 255 characters. So you sort of put the length here to let it know how many characters at the most do you want this particular string to be. Well, I want it to be 200. That sounds good. Do we want to pick a default value for this? Probably. So if you don't pick a default for a varchar, it'll default to the empty string. We could also set it to null. For date time types, we can use current timestamp. We don't have any date times in here. I'm just going to leave it null. We can always change it later. Collation, I'm going to go down here to UTF-8 general CI. I always just use that. For the attributes here, none of these really are relevant. These are all number things: binary, unsigned, unsigned zero fill, or on update current timestamp. This is if you have a timestamp or a time data type. You can have one where, like, every time you update the row, it automatically updates this to the current time. This is useful if you're like logging events or logging some piece of information. You could do this with a programming language, but it's nice to just have the database do it for you. This we don't want to be the primary key, obviously. If we set it to unique, what that means is that actor names must be unique. This is a constraint that'll be put on every row. If you try to put two people named, Scarlett Johansson with the same spelling into your database, or who else we're using, Will Smith, that insert operation will fail. It'll say, hey, that's marked as unique. An index, this means, do you want to maintain a separate, essentially binary search tree so that you can search very quickly by name? We probably do, so I'm going to go ahead and put an index on this. Full text is for uses of a different data type. There's other data types called text and medium text and like large text or something like that. This is if you want to have, this is up to like 200 characters. The text data types are for like if you want 64K of characters or multiple megabytes of characters. And if you want to make that indexable, there's like special data structures built into MySQL. I'm just going to index it because I can imagine wanting to search by name. And obviously auto-increment for name makes no sense. So we've got ID, we've got name. I'm going to, well, I'll go ahead and show you, I'll do date of birth. I'll just do birth date. And so this is going to be a date and time type. There's, of course, a whole bunch of different time types, because God forbid you have a computer system where there's like one easy way to keep track of time. I actually have no idea which is the best one to use. If we sort of hover over them, it'll tell us a date and time combination. Whoops, give me that back. So it'll go from January 1st, 1000 AD to basically the end of the year, 9999 AD. That's exciting. Timestamp, this is the universal timestamp. This goes from like 1970 to 2038. Time, this is basically just a bunch of hours. Year, you can see what this is we're looking at here. Basically just years. And then, of course, we've got date. This is just for the date. Since all we want here is actually the birthday, we don't actually need the time to go with it. I'm just going to go ahead and choose date. And the default for this, I actually want to set to null, because if, for example, we don't have a birth date for somebody, I don't know, maybe somebody's like I guess somebody we wouldn't have a birth date for would be, so you should Google Andy Kaufman, who was a comedian in the 70s and 80s. He did a lot of like sort of meta comedy where he'd have these great comedy routines where he'd be sort of bombing on stage and telling not very funny jokes, and there'd be somebody in the front row heckling him, and he would act very confused and totally bullied by the heckler, and the heckler would be really aggressive and very awkward, and of course it was all set up ahead of time to make the audience feel uncomfortable, and so the joke was actually on the audience, not on the performers, because the person heckling him was his manager. Anyway, he had this weird alter ego named Tony Clifton, who was this really obnoxious lounge singer and also comedian, but he did very, very offensive and not very funny jokes, and he just really annoyed and upset the audience. And of course, Tony Clifton was one of Andy Kaufman's alter egos, and he just sort of like, I don't know, he was on this hit sitcom called Taxi, and he like sort of forced them to have another character that was like one of his alter egos. So like that alter ego is like sort of a fake character, might not have a birth date. That was an awful long story just to explain that you might have people in Hollywood that don't have a birth date. You want to leave it null rather than none or current timestamp or something like that, because we'd like to be able to indicate it's not that the birth date is the default value, it's that I don't know what the birth date is. Collation, I don't know if you have to set this. I'm just going to leave it blank and see what it does. Attributes, I don't want to change to the current timestamp if I update it. I do want to allow it to be null. You see, when we set this to null, it says, hey, that's nullable. And I don't necessarily want to make these searchable. Maybe I will. I'll go ahead and index it. Cool. So the storage engine here, this is just, I'm just going to leave this to InnoDB. That'll just work fine. It turns out that MySQL, because it's totally awesome and has just really, really cool open source stuff integrated into it, storage engine, this is telling you what underlying system do you want to use to actually manage this table, and there's like a API that you can plug your own stuff into. I would never recommend doing it. It's a ton of work. I've never actually, that being said, I've never done it before, so I don't know it's a ton of work, but it's a ton of work. The one everyone uses these days is InnoDB. I'm just going to sort of leave that. And then I can set a collation for the whole table. I'll make that general CI. That sounds exciting. I don't even know what this means. This is new. What is this? Oh, I don't want to read any of this. Okay. Oh my god. Wow. Okay, this is way beyond the scope of anything that I've ever needed to do. I mean, I understand these words. Wow. Well, anyway, apparently MySQL has gotten increasingly badass over the years. I'm not going to do anything in there because I don't know what it means, and I've never used it before, so I assume it'll be okay. So let's go ahead and save this table. Dun 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 dun. Check it out. We got an actors table. So you can click on this. It actually ran a query, tried to select all the actors, and it's saying, hey, empty set, there's nothing in there. Well, let's put something in there. So when you're inserting through the web interface here, let's just go ahead. We'll put in Will Smith, his birth date. Oh, there's a calendar. Oh, that's friggin' cool. I think he was born in well, screw it. I mean, this is kind of cheating. But, you know, IMDb. Oh, that's really stupid. I could have just used Wikipedia. This is like extra steps that I'm wasting literally moments of your life. It's weird how when I have all this time to prepare for these, I still end up rambling on annoyingly. Or I don't think I'm annoying, but perhaps I am. I don't know. September 25th, 1968. Okay, I was close. You know, I don't know what format this needs to be in specifically. So what I'm going to do is click, yeah, there we go. 1968. September is the 10th month, and let's go with the 25th. Computer science people tend to always put their dates in this format. I mean, I know that like Europeans do day, month, year, and Americans do month, day, year. Computer scientists always do year, month, day. And they, you know, if this were like, you know, September, they would, oh, was it September? Yeah, that should have been 09 anyway. Good. They'll always sort of use leading zeros. The reason being, if you have a bunch of these as strings, you can just sort them, and it'll sort them into sort of time order as well as kind of like alphabetic or numerical order. So computer scientists love stuff like this. So that's one that we want to insert. I'm actually going to do two inserts. I'm going to use the second one here. I'm also going to do, nope, Scarlett Johansson. And I know she was, like, I don't know, 80-something. I know she was born in my birthday, the one of the celebrities. I can't remember that many of the others, but there's a bunch of other November birthdays. Yeah, there we go. Yep, look at that, 84. Okay, I thought it was 83, but it was 84. Okay, good. 19. There we go. 84. Whoops. Dash 11 22. Cool. So I got those, and you notice I'm leaving out the ID because it's set to auto increment. So watch what happens. We're going to insert. Bum-ba-da-bum. 2 rows inserted. It's actually showing you the syntax for doing a couple of insert statements. So it's insert into Hollywood actors. So the actors table of the Hollywood's database. ID, name, birth date. And then it's listing out here values, null, Will Smith, this birth date, null, Scarlett Johansson, that birth date. And the reason it's leaving these null, it knows that the database is just going to automatically create auto-increment numbers for those, so it doesn't really need to put them in there. So this is what's really cool about this PhpMyAdmin. You don't actually have to learn the syntax for insert statements. You can just like run the insert statements, and then it'll generate the SQL and run it all for you. And then you can kind of look at it and, you know, figure out things from it. You can also Google the syntax for any of these statements that you need to run. It's all available. So now we can go up here. Well, let's browse and see what... Oh, look at that. ID 2, we've got Scarlett Johansson. ID 1, we've got Will Smith. They've been inserted into our database. Fantastic. Let's make movies table as well. So I want to create a table. Let me go back up here to the sort of overview of the database. That's where the Create Table menu is. You can either get to that up here, you can get to it by clicking up here. Oh, there's even a little, this is new, there's a little new button here for, oh, and it just assumed I wanted 4 things. Well, that's really irritating. What if I only wanted 3 things or wanted 10 things? I guess I can always add more columns, but I think if you leave a column blank, it won't insert it. Well, let's find out. So let's do movies. table name, movies. We need to have an ID. I probably don't need more than 16 million movies. Is that how many it was? Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll make this int just in case there's even more movies. I do want it to be unsigned because it is a primary key, and I want it to be auto increment, and I can't default it to null or anything like that. So that's the ID. We also want the title. We also want the year. The year, I can make this under date and time, I can make this a year. The title, I need to make this a varchar. Hopefully it won't be more than 255 characters. Titles can't be null. I want to see what happens if I set the overall collation to UTF-8 general CI and see if that actually sets the collation of all the subtables. You can see how much character sets actually matter in my day-to-day life. They actually don't at all. Year, and then well, let's make up a fourth thing. How about the amount that the film grossed? Because people seem to care about that. So that's a dollar value that could be very high. I think an int will work. Because it's gross, it can't actually be 0. So we'll sort of... Oh, this is primary. The title we're gonna index it so that we can search on it. Oh, yeah, sorry, that's stupid. Director ID. So director ID, we're gonna make this a medium int, unsigned. This is going to be a foreign key to the directors table once we make the directors table. Because it's a foreign key, you have to index it. You actually don't have to index it, but it's a very good idea to. For performance reasons. Now, very interestingly, what makes this a foreign key, you can actually add foreign key constraints to this column to let us know that it's a foreign key. But if you just use it like a foreign key, in other words, when you do your joins, you just, and if you haven't listened to the lecture on joins, do so, then it just is a foreign key if you use it like a foreign key. It's kind of awesome. I don't need any values there. Yeah, let's see what happens. This looks pretty reasonable. All right, what do we got? Ha! Totally worked. So now we've got a movies table, and if we browse everything, see, there's nothing in the movies table. Let's make one more table. We'll make the directors table. So we want to make directors. What do I want in there? How about just, I'll make this really simple. I'll just make it a primary key and the director's name. So we'll make it just two things. ID, and we decided we're going to make these medium int. This is going to be auto increment. Primary. We're going to make it unsigned, and I'm going to set the collation for the entire table to be UTF-8 general, so hopefully that'll set it for everything underneath it. And then we also want the name. We're going to make that a varchar. We'll make it 200. Yeah, well, that should do it. Do I want to make the names searchable? Sure, I'll index them. Okay, so let's do that. Bam! Look at that. So we got actors, directors, movies. Now, of course, we need to make our final table, which is actors in movies. Actors in movies. So, for this, I'm actually going to generate a separate primary key so that I can show you the unique index feature, which is pretty awesome. I'm going to include the name of the role. So I'm going to use a total of 4 columns. So we're going to have just sort of a general ID to identify the relationship. And I'll make this actors in movies. I don't know. Int is probably too big, but I'll make it int anyway. This is primary. I'm going to make it I'm going to make it unsigned, and I'm going to make it auto increment. For this, I'll set for the whole table. Maybe they're pushing me to, I don't even know. Yeah, there we go. I'll stick with UTF-8 general. So we also have actor ID and we have movie ID. These we both made medium int. And we made them unsigned. Now I'm going to leave off any indexing because I want to create a unique key, but I want to create it across both columns. So I'm actually going to do it through a separate interface. So I'll show you how to do that. And then we want to have the sort of name of role. Or is it like this? No, I think it's like this. Well, whatever. We can always change it later. I'll 255 and I don't know, maybe 200, maybe 100. How long do character names? How 159? There we go. That sounds reasonable. Default values. Don't want any default values. This looks very reasonable. Okay, so let's create this. Bam. Now we're going to go back into this actors and movies. Now watch this. If I've got this browse, if I click structure, that's going to show me essentially what I just created. It's going to tell you, you know, what's set to auto increment. Are there unsigned attributes set for things? Are things allowed to be null? It's going to kind of give you an overview of the structure. You know what? I'm actually going to make this bigger. Oh, that looks better. Okay, cool. And what I want to do is I want to add a unique index. So I'm going to click this plus indexes button. This just sort of displays this. So you can see I've already got a primary key index. B tree is the type. That means using a binary search tree. All of these have to be unique. I want to create a new index on 2 columns. Go. So the index type is unique. The 2 columns I want to put it on as actor ID and movie ID. So we're going to say that actors, an actor being in a movie is a unique relationship. We're going to ignore Eddie Murphy for a second here, playing, you know, every character in his last however many movies. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to name this. I wonder if I can leave it blank and see what it does. Let's see what that does. That totally worked. Yeah, so it's calling it the actor ID key. The name of the key is not super relevant in any particular way, but it's saying that it's covering both of these columns, and it's a unique index. So, at least I think it is. Let's edit it and make sure. Yeah, it's a unique index. So what that means is when you put rows into this table, the combination of the actor ID and the movie ID together must be unique. If it's not unique, the insert will actually fail. So this is an integrity check within the database. If there's already actor 5 in movie 7, you can't put actor 5 in movie 7 again. And in order to create those kinds of indexes across multiple keys, I think you actually have to do that through this separate interface. Now, suppose we want to add a column. We can actually do that here. Add one column at the end of the table, or at the beginning of the table, or after a certain after something. You know, go, and that'll sort of bring this up. So if we want to add something new to the end of the table, you know, we could go, and then we could just go ahead and fill out all this information and click save. I don't really want to change this, so I'm not going to. I just want to show you how to do that. And that's really all that's involved in creating your database schema. Oh yeah, this is really cool. This actually will, you can kind of like, wow. This stuff is all new. This was not in earlier versions of PhpMyAdmin. These little widgets over here. Wow. Well, I've gotten with the 21st century here. Cool. Yeah. So that's basically what we've got, and then you can go ahead and put your stuff in there. This is a fantastic database administration tool. Very, very powerful. Very, very useful. Highly recommend using this as opposed to learning all of the command line stuff for all of your like. Creating tables, altering tables, adding indexes, adding columns, all of that stuff you can do through here. Browsing just to kind of get a quick overview of what's in the database. You can go ahead and use this interface for that. You can actually do quick searches. So we could say, okay, well, I just want birth dates that are, you know, less than, you know, 1970-01-01, go, and that's going to give me only Will Smith, because he's the only one of the 2 people in our database that was born before 1970. And so you can see it's actually generating the SQL and executing it. So for all your management stuff, this is the way to go. For all of your selecting and inserting, that stuff you're going to have to do, learn how to do, writing the queries yourself. Because that's going to involve how you're going to do your joins between tables and things like that. Good. I think we're good to go. Oh, let's close with some music. Woohoo! Let's get to the good part again. There we go. Woohoo! All right, great. Let's get this uploaded.